Hello everybody, Chocolate Guy here, and welcome back to another countdown. So SpongeBob Season 5 is not great and has many problems and bad episodes. But I meant what I said last time, that when it's good, it is really good, and has some very creative and unique episodes that rival and are even better than the best from Season 4. When the season has a great idea, it has a great idea that it goes all in on, leading to some really fun and funny episodes, whether that be because of a great concept, really good story, or just having the best jokes. Here is my list of the top 5 best SpongeBob Season 5 episodes. So while there were an amount of really good episodes this season, there weren't a ton of great ones, making picking episodes 5 and 4 for this list a little difficult, as I had a few tight competitors to choose between, and Blackened Sponge barely squeaked on this list. I just really love the premise of this episode. It feels like one you would see in Season 1, or maybe even in Season 2. SpongeBob lying about how he got an injury, and the more people he tells, the crazier his stories get, is not only a very true-to-life experience, but one the episode is able to get so much comedic material out of every crazy story he tells. Jack M. Crazyfish is such a fun, over-the-top villain, and SpongeBob's stories surrounding him are just perfectly ridiculous to make every story so entertaining. I even love some of the people's reactions to SpongeBob stories and the variety in even an element like that. The episode is just structured so nicely as well, with the stories getting bigger and bigger and funnier, with the scene at the Krusty Krab being unbelievably funny. Just the way he walks in there and talks to everybody, it's hilarious. This episode, we really get to see such a different and weirdly insecure, but at the same time putting on overconfidence version of SpongeBob we don't really get to see that often. And it is so funny, especially in this scene. The "I'm talking to you, Grandma" had me dead. And his later response to her, and even her kind of throwing him under the bus later when Jack M. Crazyfish does show up. This is definitely one of my favorite scenes of the season. It's perfect. The opener is also really good too, with the funny dream, and then the overcomplicated way SpongeBob could get hurt, and then him avoiding that injury to get hurt in a completely different, maybe even lamer way. And I do really like the twist of Jack M. Crazyfish being a real person. It's cool that SpongeBob, in his dream and story, was pulling from someone he maybe saw and heard the name of once in passing, but didn't remember them even though they stuck in the subconscious of his mind, and just assumed he made up this big tough guy in his dreams. I also really love the joke detail that sometimes he even forgets to give a reason as to how he got hurt because he's so busy proving that he's tough, so he ends up coming up with even lamer reasons sometimes, like when he pokes his eye with the straw in the one story. I will say, with all this said, I do like the intro, but it's nothing great, and the episode takes a bit of time to really get into the meat of this concept, and once SpongeBob reveals what actually happened at the end to Jack M. Crazyfish and all the other customers at the Krusty Krab, the episode does lose a little bit of steam. His retelling of what actually happened is pretty long and drawn out, and the ending gag is fine, which is why I wouldn't consider this a great episode, and it is only number 5. But this is still just a really good outing from this season because of its fun concept, and still gets some of the season's best scenes out of it, earning a spot on this list. So this one is weird. because I think the concept to this episode is really good, and I think the back end of it is truly excellent and hilarious. It's one of my favorite things from this season, which I'll get into in a little bit. But the first chunk of this episode is kinda crappy. Well, not horrible, it is just SpongeBob and Patrick being super annoying and then Squidward getting hurt. And then when they go to the hospital, it's just SpongeBob being annoying during this procedure. And it's honestly a little humorous at first, but wears thin really quickly, and is also just obnoxious and unpleasant. These scenes are the worst of any on this list, and it really made me debate putting this episode on the list at all. But when this episode gets going, it really gets going. The premise of Squidward being handsome, and the jokes around people being infatuated with him, is one that sounds like it wouldn't work, or be kind of funny but not that great, but just hits such a weird and unexpected note for me. It's just so pleasantly hilarious to see a character who usually gets so annoyingly crapped on get intentionally annoyingly praised. It's really nice and incredibly funny. And while yes, this episode is mostly the same joke over and over again of people being over dramatic when it comes to how handsome Squidward is and how it affects them, there's enough variety within it, and the joke itself is just funny enough for this not to be much of an issue. And I love how perfectly the episode is paced, and how this obsession with Squidward the town has just gets bigger and bigger as the episode goes on. It makes this episode really engaging, and perfectly sets up the final scene. Now, while all that stuff I talked about is great, it probably wouldn't have been enough on its own to land this episode on this list, especially with its downsides. But the final scene, with even more handsome Squidward, is just perfect. Maybe it's the meme side of my brain and how much this meme has gone around online, but I love everything about this scene. The design of Squidward is so over-detailed and amazing, and the opera music with him spinning and the falling shoe from earlier coming back, it is just such an amazing scene to end the episode with after all the great build-up. If you somehow have not seen this episode, just watch it for that scene alone. The actual ending gag with Mr. Krabs hitting Squidward's face is kinda lame, but it's whatever. So yeah, despite the episode's problems, the good stuff was so good that it propelled it up to make the episode really good overall and land it at a decent spot on this list. It isn't any higher because of those problems, but I will say, I do think the fact that the first portion is so crummy honestly makes the second half more surprising and more enjoyable, which is pretty interesting and makes that part not bring the episode down anywhere near as much, even if I wish they could have achieved that same idea or feeling with a better first chunk of the episode. Either way, the next three are just overall more solid packages anyways. So this is where the episodes get really good, as this is a great goddamn episode. Well, this episode isn't the funniest, and doesn't have the best concept of the season, it does have the best story and character writing. The story in this one is actually really good, and this episode explores slightly more complex themes in a successful and meaningful way. I love Jim, and he is one of my favorites, or just my favorite one-off character of the show. His dynamic with SpongeBob is so unique and interesting. This is the only time in the show, as far as I'm aware, we get to see someone who is better at fry cooking, and we get to see SpongeBob have kind of an inferiority complex about this topic. Jim is such a great character, because on the one hand, he does sort of seem to want to help SpongeBob become a better fry cook and give him some good advice, and seems to be genuinely a decent guy who just knows his worth as a worker. On the other hand, he is rich and stuck up, maybe justifiably so, and this contrast leads to some really funny moments, especially when he works with SpongeBob, who has always been built up as the best fry cook ever and can't do anything wrong, and doesn't know how to handle the idea of that maybe not being true. The montage of him working with Jim and Jim flushing his burgers down the toilet that were probably fine is hilarious and shows off this dynamic really well. I also just adore the flashback sequences, showing off an older version of the Krusty Krab that looks like a fancy upscale restaurant, but all the characters have weird 70s aesthetics to them. It's such a weird mismatch, which makes it so funny, and I especially love Squidward having beautiful hair and losing it abruptly, and the twist that Mr. Krabs' sideburns were fake, which makes you kind of question when this all actually took place. It's a bit of fun lore on the show we don't usually get, and they just do a lot of funny and interesting stuff with it. And all of this is a great use of the episode's plot and having Jim around. But what I think really makes this episode special is its ending message and theme. All this praise towards Jim makes SpongeBob believe Jim is going to replace him and take his job. And while that obviously isn't the case, you actually understand why SpongeBob would think that. This actually works as a bit of a legitimate drama. But this nicely leads into us learning the reason why Jim left. Because he wasn't getting paid enough, a problem SpongeBob would never have, which makes a lot of sense. And the scene is interesting and funny, and should be really predictable, and kind of is, but doesn't feel that way because of how well the story is structured and written, and how compelling the story actually is, and you're really interested on how all the characters are feeling about this situation and these circumstances. But after this is revealed, Jim leaves SpongeBob with the idea that he might be a good fry cook, but he'll never be a great fry cook as long as he works for the Krusty Krab. I think this is a really interesting and thought-provoking note to end the episode on, because Jim leaving was really about him knowing his worth as a worker. And it's kinda sad SpongeBob does such great work and could be destined for better things, but just stays at the Krusty Krab for nothing. In fact, sometimes he has to pay Mr. Krabs, according to other episodes. And for how much he loves making patties, it does feel like his skills and talent are going to waste. But at the same time, he loves the Krusty Krab, and maybe it doesn't matter because he does seem to have the means and want to remain there. It's just a really interesting thought, and not something I expected from a SpongeBob episode, which on top of everything else, just makes this one really fantastic and so different from any of its peers, including any episode in seasons 1 through 3. I could never see an episode in those seasons tackling an idea like this, or really thinking in a more nuanced way about SpongeBob's role at the Krusty Krab and his career as a fry cook, even if this episode is nowhere near as good as a lot of the really great episodes from those seasons. Because with all that said, the reason this isn't in the top 2 is that it could have gone further with these ideas, as they are really interesting, but they're not actually that complex when they're presented in the episode, and there are pockets of this episode that could be funnier. But this is still a great episode through and through because of how different and unique it really is. Roller Cowards has one of the best concepts of any SpongeBob episode. The idea of both SpongeBob and Patrick being afraid to go on a ride they assume the other's looking forward to is genius. It would be kind of humorous if it was just one of them who was nervous to go on this ride, but the fact that both of them are so pitifully afraid but too self-conscious to tell the other leads to such a fun dynamic between the two. They get so many funny and creative jokes out of every scene, and not only use this concept to its fullest, but also the episode's location to its fullest as well. I don't know if there's another episode that uses Glove World in such a complete, in-depth, and fun way. They get a joke out of how weird and creepy the mascot is, SpongeBob and Patrick being afraid on this little kiddie ride, which is so iconic. jokes on weird people at this amusement park with Larry, and even jokes on how something that might seem more dangerous than it is, with the old man joke that wasn't one I remembered, but it absolutely killed me watching it again. I don't really have much to say on this one other than it's got a great concept that showcases a relatable idea and has fun with this great dynamic between our main characters and the location the episode takes place in to tell so many amazing jokes. And the episode does nicely build to a great scene where they both reveal their fears in a nice way, but end up going on the ride anyways. And after how much time the episode has built up this crazy ride, it really is funny how dangerous and crazy it actually is. And I like that the episode is able to have this over-the-top scene and all these really ridiculous jokes, but still have a real message about being honest with friends, and that something you're afraid of might not be as bad as it seems, like going on a roller coaster. The messaging isn't super deep or anything, but I think it's cool that the episode is successfully able to do both these messages. There's just so many other great gags and moments in this episode, like the scene where SpongeBob beats himself up with an ice cream cone, and Patrick talking to himself in the mirror in a really weird way, and this baby's reaction to SpongeBob and Patrick being afraid of that kiddie ride I mentioned earlier, and them thinking he was weird and he was actually afraid just to keep up their cover to each other. This episode is just so great, and was very close to being number one. The reason it barely missed out on landing that number one spot is because some of the jokes, while great, can be a little repetitive for my liking, which does hold this episode back just a teeny bit, but man, this one was a really impressive episode from this season that I enjoyed a lot. But before we get into what I believe to be the best episode of Season 5, here is 7 honorable mentions. While this season was not great overall, and there weren't a ton of really good or great episodes, there were still definitely a handful that deserved to get recognized for being leagues above most of their competitors. So I think this episode just gets the best use out of the short format episodes Season 5 has. It's got a fun concept and uses it really well, and gets many great visual and word-based gags out of the battle between SpongeBob and this patty-making machine. And the rhyming narration around it is also really, really good and used very effectively. It's just a whole lot of fun, and the episode has many stellar and hilarious moments. And I think this idea is just so perfect for the short format and would have overstayed its welcome if the episode was 11 minutes. With either the narration and rhyming getting repetitive, and the story itself not having enough substance to fill the runtime. With all that said though, I do wish the episode was just ever so slightly longer, as some jokes can feel pretty simple when they could be a lot stronger. Keeping this episode off the list proper. This is a very good episode that actually has some pretty stellar commentary about the SpongeBob brand and critiques of different aspects of it through many interesting scenes, and kinda gives us a possible look into what the writers think the show has become up until this point, through these different scenes and examples the show demonstrates. It's pretty fascinating and unique. There's very few episodes of the show like it. I also love the setup with this weird, unique food critic, and some of the jokes surrounding him and his scenes are wickedly funny. Everything that happens on that news station just has me dead. I think there are parts of the episode that could be a little stronger on the comedy end, which is what ultimately kept it off the list, but this and the original Fry Cook, subject matter-wise, are the most interesting episodes of the season by far. So this is an episode I've heard varying things on, and watching through it again, I was a little conflicted at first. There are definitely parts of it I find funnier than others. Like the beginning, it's alright, and the jokes do lose a little steam near the very end, and throughout there are some jokes that are just kinda fine, But the bulk of this episode is really funny. They take Patrick's stupidity and his terrible songwriting to some pretty great places. And we get some of the best jokes of the season out of it that I still quote today. Like, "This is gym class," "Is Patrick thinking again?" and "Cotton candy, get yourself some cotton candy, can't have an angry mob without cotton candy." Also, the joke of the band members being so grossed out by Patrick's horrible song, and then it cutting to their graves, has gotta be top 5 jokes all season for how perfect the timing is and the punchline. Patrick's song is also just wonderfully annoying and awful in a way that is enjoyable and not annoying to the audience, and leads to so many creative reactions from different fish in the episode that the episode uses to create a really entertaining and fun experience. So yeah, there's just a lot that works here, despite it not quite being top 5 material. This is another episode example that just uses the shorts format very well. While the twist is predictable, and for being really short, the episode does take a little bit of time to really get into the good jokes. The premise of Patrick trying not to eat what he thinks is SpongeBob's donut, and trying to hide it before he comes over in the weirdest places that make it unedible is really funny. Just his ridiculous mental struggle of dealing with the guilt of having SpongeBob's donut and trying to find a way not to get caught with it and doing all these weird things is so humorous. But I especially love all the weird, sometimes contrived ways he thinks SpongeBob will find the donut when he tries to hide it in more strange places. Not the best short, as it doesn't get the most out of its concept in certain places, but a very fun one nonetheless. This is definitely the weakest episode in the honorable mention segment, because this episode can lean slightly too much on babies are gross humor and can be a little repetitive in places. But I still think this is a very funny episode throughout that has a unique story and plan from Plankton, which leads to a lot of great moments caused by this weird aging ray, whether the characters are old or babies. Plankton's ray gun logically doesn't actually make much sense, but that's kind of part of the nonsensical fun, and they play up that fact effectively, which leads to some great scenes and jokes. So I do still think this is one of the season's strongest episodes, despite its faults. I love the concept of this episode a lot. The mystery around what Blackjack is doing with SpongeBob's parents is fun and compelling, and it leads to a lot of great scenes with some really good jokes, and allows us to see more of SpongeBob's family and some characters and locations we don't normally get to see, and even some fun new locations. It makes this episode feel unique and special. Also, because you're never quite sure what Blackjack is up to, it makes the story a little more serious and engaging than your regular SpongeBob episode. And I even really like the twist. It actually makes a lot of sense, and is something I wouldn't have seen coming if I was watching this episode for the first time. With all that said, there are points of this episode that are a little light on jokes, and the part at SpongeBob's uncle's house is funny at first, but goes on for way too long, and does bring the episode down a bit because of that, keeping it away from the list proper. This is an episode I remember being super middle of the road, but man, it was an absolute blast. The concept of there being an actual war in Bikini Bottom, and Patrick's misremembering the details of that war to be about washing your hands or not washing your hands, and then we don't actually learn what the real war was about, is hilarious and a funny enough setup for the episode to be great, but the actual story that comes out of it is really, really fun. The battle between SpongeBob and Patrick, and the creative ways they use the clean and dirty elements and the different environments in this battle, and just how fast-paced it all is, leads for non-stop fun and just one of the most enjoyable episodes all season. It's not the most insanely funny episode, and could have stronger jokes in places, but that doesn't really matter too much when the episode uses its concept this well to create such an entertaining time. But With all that said, let's finish this list and finally get into what I consider to be the best episode of SpongeBob Season 5. I know this is a painfully predictable choice, but come on, you all knew this episode was gonna top this list. It's basically perfect. It has a great concept and story, which leads to so many amazing jokes, and the episode just gets the absolute most out of every scene the episode has. There's not really a single joke or thing they don't do with the Krusty Krab being frozen, and right when the episode could start to get boring, Plankton joins the mix for a really fun and hilarious ever-evolving climax. Just the way the episode uses the thermostat throughout, but especially in that climax, is so creative, and it really does wonders for the story and humor throughout the entire episode. I honestly really do not have much to say about this one. This might be my shortest #1 segment of all time, because not much explaining is actually needed. Everyone loves this episode, and all the praises for it are justified. It's just the perfect post-classic SpongeBob episode, because it has the best concept and uses it to its fullest, a really fun story, the most jokes and the best jokes, and has not even a scent of any of the problems that engulf this season, the last one, or the ones that come after. It's just kinda spotless, and I really don't have any issues with it. It's easily my favorite episode since Season 3, and while it can't compare with the best of the best from those 3 seasons, it can compete with quite a few episodes that are on the higher end of rankings as far as those seasons are concerned. So, it's for all those reasons that despite Roller Cowards having a genius idea they really go far with, and the original Fry Cook tackling some more complex ideas that I could have never imagined the show doing, especially so successfully, this episode was always going to be #1 on this list. And with all that said, the list is done. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more content similar to this in the future. Also, leave me a comment telling me what you thought of my list and what your own would have been. In the post tab on my channel, I keep my subscribers updated for when new videos are coming out and what they will be, so keep an eye on that for more stuff coming soon. And with that, this has been Chocolate Guy, signing off.